Hi, I'm Lindy Whitten. Welcome back to the studio. And today I'm going to continue with the lesson, and I'm going to be doing the overpainting this time. This was the reference that I started with, and you can see that I've made the horizon line a bit higher. I want this painting to be all about the path and the vegetation, so don't be afraid to move your horizons to change things around. What I'm going to do now is put in a very loose sky. I'm not going to do a graded sky. I want something with a bit of movement and excitement. So what I'm going to do is just take three colours. It's white, cerulean blue and phthalo blue. I'm going to mix them together with some heavy gel, gloss gel, and mix that all onto the canvas just with a very big brush. So I'm just using the heavy gel gloss along with the Atelier interactive paints. I'm going to put a big swatch of it onto here. So a big lot of it on there. I am going to mix a bit just to get it started, and then what I'm going to do is pick it all up and even while I'm doing that you can see that there are suggestions of those wispy clouds coming in. I'm just taking a whole lot off my palette, putting it all on there. Then I'm taking a very big wash brush and just starting to move it around nice and energetically, so I'm getting some nice movement in the sky. Not worrying if I go into these trees here that I've already painted with an underpainting. I can worry about fixing that up later. Pushing the paint around with that brush. I've got a tape you can see from the horizon line, and I've measured that out both sides so that I know it's nice and straight. It's just a hint of that red showing through now there. I'm going to go around the sides of my canvas so I get a nice even sky around there. Around this side as well, and then I'm just going to tip it forward like so and do it all across the top, just collecting some of this in as I go. I've just bought myself a lovely set of pastel tinted paints. I really hate mixing up pastels. They're a lot of effort, so I saw this in the art shop today and I thought I'll try those out. So I'm going to add in a little bit of some pale tints as well into the sky for some of the clouds, and I've got a little bit of a pink and a blue, only a tiny bit of the pink, a bit more of the blue, and taking those with my palette knife and just smoothing them through the sky like so. And then, in a most delicious way, I'm just going to use my fingers. It's a lovely tactile sensation doing that. And I've got some nice little bits of pastel colours in there. I've got a little pastel lemon as well. I'm going to take a tiny bit of that for a little bit of sunlight. So the pastel lemon, I'm taking a tiny bit with my finger for a little bit of sunlight on there. I don't want too much of it because it'll turn it a bit green. And I might in fact add back in a bit of pink over that. I quite like working with my fingers when it's big scale. So in comes a bit of the pink, a bit more. Let's be nice and generous. Just squeezing it straight out into my finger. And then I can add in a little bit more along the horizon there. Some little clouds going along there. I want to be careful that I don't get, I don't make it like little finger people along there. I don't want little finger marks. I just want to be swooshing around. I'm going to add in a little bit of violet down there as well. With a lilac-y sort of colour. This is a good opportunity to drop that. A good opportunity to try some of these tints out. So here we go with a little bit of lilac, and I'm just going in behind the trees, pushing that nice and low in the horizon round the corner, and I'll add a little bit of that lilac up here as well. And I'm adding it in now with a little bit of thickness, so they get a little sense of texture there as well. Just stepping back there to see how it's going. I might like to lighten off the bottom of the sky there a little bit, so I've got a wee bit of a grade coming down, not too much. I also have got a bit of the underpainting there showing through. I don't want to, so I'm just doing a little bit of spot checking with my brush there. And then down here, what I'm going to do is just put a slight more amount of white in there into the sky. And I'll do that with my brush, just to tone down the blue a bit. Oh, and here we go. Pushing it in with the brush, and it sort of blends into the bottom of those clouds there. And you get a little bit of a grade. I didn't want too much, but I just want a bit. So you can see, once again, a big canvas doesn't need to take a lot more time than a small canvas. That sky went in very quickly. I'm really happy with it. I'm just going to rip that tape. Oh, just a little smidge there that I wasn't so happy with, so I'll just add in a little touch of a cloud there to disguise that. Okay, so now I'm going to just take the tape off, check out my horizon, which is looking lovely. Got a bit of blue on there from the sky, but I'm not worried about it. I'll just rub it off with my fingers. So working back into the sea will be the next thing, but I want to leave that to dry, because then I'm going to tape up the sky area and work my sea back into it. And I can work down into the path while I'm waiting though. So for the path, I'm going to use some of those pastel tints again. I'll be using some of the pink and the lilacs, the blues, and the lemon. Oh, actually, I'm not going to use the lemon. I don't want it to be a lemon colour. I'm going to use Naples Yellow, which is a warmer kind of yellow. The pale blue, Naples Yellow, a pale lilac, and a pale pink. And they are going to go on now across here. And again, it's going to be using the palette knife for this one, and some more of the heavy gloss gel just to give it a bit of body. Got a blob of paint that big, I wouldn't use any more than that same amount of gel with it. So I'm just mixing up the gel now and mixing up those, and they are going to go on. So at this point I need to think about which way the sun's shining. I'm going to make from my reference photo, and the sun is shining from this side, shadowed there, and going onto that. So this is going to be the shadowed side of the path over here. So I'm just taking those shadowy kind of colours, the blues and the pinks and the purple, the mauves, and popping them on like that with the palette knife, just dragging it across, thinking about all the time the curves of the path, fact that it curves across like so. What I want to add in is some of that white now to mix with the Naples Yellow. There will be darker colours going over these shadows later on, so don't worry about the fact that it's not very dark at the moment. I will be darkening that up. This is just to get a whole lot of nice light soft colours in there. Out on the beach, there's going to be another mix of those colours. Pull it across with the palette knife, and again, very, very quick. I'm not worrying about what I've got underneath it because I'll deal with that later on and just go back over it. Pulling those colours back down into here. I'd like to have some of those texture marks in where I'm pulling it across. I don't want them to be too even, but I want to keep some of them. So this side of the path is going to be lighter, and I'm letting some of that sandy colour drag up into where the vegetation is going to be. The vegetation is going to be hiding it a bit there. And I'm going to give it a little bit of more colour that side. Some of the cooler colours mixed with some pinks as well. I'm not going to go too far down to this area because it's going to have some much darker shadows down there. So just warming it all up and cooling it all down alternatively there. I need a bit more of the Naples Yellow and a bit more of the white. And that will be the path almost done. Again, it's very quick when you use the palette knife and you're worried about only an impression rather than getting an exact rendition. And just as I did in the pastel lesson with this photo, I'm only going for an impression, not an exact rendition. Again, I'm taking those Naples Yellow and the white, mixing them all together, and now putting basically a bit more sunshine on the path. And you can see that really warms up my path there. Pulling it, using the palette knife into the vegetation there, and then mixing it a little bit. You can see I'm leaving some of those marks from the knife as it comes across. Just warm it up a little bit more there. Actually, it's cooling it down because I've mixed it with a bit of the blue and it's all turning to green. So just be a little bit more careful there. Scrape it the other way to avoid that. I can go back over there with some warm wash later on. I do need to go back out onto the beach there, pull a bit more sand across there. And remember, I've got that nice warm wash I put on at the beginning, and that will help establish the beach. But I'm going to put a bit more pink into the beach. And I've got a bit of that bluey purple there. Let's put that in. Blues and pinks. And then I want a bit more yellow in there, so I'm going to grab a bit more Naples Yellow, just a smidge of it, and some white. Oh, I'm just playing dropsy today, aren't I? So Naples Yellow and a bit more of the white. And that will just be to add a bit more lightness to the beach. I just mix it up with my palette knife a bit. And then you get it just mixing on the canvas, which is more effective. You get more colour variation that way. And I'm just pulling a bit more of the warm colours through there. As I go up into the the vegetation there, I'm pulling it up that way a bit. You can see sloping it a little upward slope to give it a little sense that the path has got a little curve in it, a little dip. And those little marks I'm making with my knife there are also about giving some sense of curvature to the path, because they're curving lines. And across the beach is just sweeping lines like so. But I like to leave some marks in the sand as well, not to have it too super smooth. Right, so sky and path done. The path's got a nice curve to it, both that way as a lead in, but also in terms of how it lies in the land. We've got the beach there now to add in the sky, and then we'll go on to the vegetation. It's taking shape. What I need to do now is let both those dry before I put in the sea, so I'll come back to you later. I've put the tape on here so that I can keep the sky horizon fine. I've got some pastel aquamarine, bring it a bit closer, pastel aquamarine, some turquoise light, phthalo blue, and this is just some of the gloss, heavy gloss gel, which will give me a nice glossy sea and help the little waves stay nice and wavy. So I'm just mixing that all together using my palette knife. I've just mixed the, actually I'm going to, for this one I'm going to use the big brush. I'm just going to brush it straight across. I've mixed the aquamarine, sorry, the turquoise and the phthalo blue here, running it across, picking up another lot, running it across, and then I'm going to add in the aquamarine, the pale tint, pick up a little bit of that. And I'm popping it around the sides, keeping it nice and loose. And then I'm going to pick up the aquamarine and just run it through a little bit there to suggest the lightening off of the water as it comes in towards the shore, and some little wavelets. So now I'm picking up a whole chunk of it, and I'm just running it along with the edge of that brush to make some little wavelets as it comes into shore. Here the water is coming over the sand there. I can add a little highlight there if I want to, with just a touch, a really small touch of straight white. And I'm just going to take a little flat brush, dip it straight into the white, and just add a few tiny touches of the white on the top of the wave there. And I can add a couple of little touches down here as well. The less white you have, the whiter the white looks when it's against something that isn't quite white. So just save it for the highlights. I do need to fix a couple of little things back there. First of all, back here it's a little bit thin, so I'm just putting a little bit more on. And then that. Okay, that's my water. I can just wet this a little bit now. It's interactive, so I can wet it and it will work back in there. I just want to take some of that blue out. It's wet sand here, so it needs to be shiny. And it's not shiny if I get that. It has to be quite smooth to look shiny. So I just want to take the little dry look off it by running a wet brush through it. That's better. I'll show you what I mean in the notes if you can't see it close up enough there. But as I smooth it out and lose that scrumbled effect, it all looks much smoother, the sand, and wetter. Okay, water in, let's take off the tape. And I've got a little thin sliver back there, which is going to be a little bit of land. Did I intend that to be there? I didn't intend that to be there. It doesn't matter though, because I looked at it and thought, yes, it would be quite good to have a little sliver of land there, so I'm going to build that up. If I wanted to, I could go back and fill that in with my brush, but I don't think I will. I think I will keep a little bit of land there, and that will give me another sense of depth going back. So you can work with your mistakes. You don't, when you have a plan and something changes, see if you can work that into your painting, or whether it's best to go back to your original plan. You don't have to always be correcting everything that is a mistake. What I'm going to do is take a little bit of purple and a bit of raw sienna, mix them together, and then I'll add in the headland there. So this time I'm using a small brush to do it, but I could use my palette knife if I wanted to. So I've made it a little bit lighter, and we'll see how that goes. That's better. So that's the effect with the brush. But I could just as easy use a palette knife, scrape some up on the edge and just slide it along there. And you can see that's quite effective too. And the little bit of light underpainting that's showing through is going to be the suggestion of a beach back there. And you can see that that's quite effective. Adding in slight bit of a greeny colour there behind the beach. As I get right out here, I'm using the flat side of the palette knife rather than the curve, because I want to pull it right down it's kind of stopped right in the middle, which is not great, but it's so far back I don't really think it's a problem, and at this stage I'm going to leave it and then I'll check it up later. Now I'm just introducing a few little bits of darker edging along where the beach meets the land. And that's it. So now I have sky, clouds, a bit of a headland back there, and the water and the beach and path. I will need more shadows down here, and then I'll be needing the vegetation. So for the shadows down here, I'm going to be using the purple that I just laid out, mixed with a bit of the yellow ochre, and I'll just lay in some soft washes there. And the shadows are coming from this side, but they're going to be going all the way across here. So they're really following the contours of the path. Bits of warmth in it, some cooler purples, some darker, some really dark, and some light. And you can see how the little bits of suggestions of grass patterns there are helping to describe the form of the path, a little dip in the path as well. I'm going to make some even darker shadows by adding in a bit more of the purple. And I'm just washing this across. I'm not using great thick amounts of paint on it. I want them to be sort of transparent, the shadows. Pushing a little bit in from here as well. This brush is quite good at suggesting the grasses as I pull it across. The bristles spread out and make the suggestion of grass forms. It's picking up a little bit of the colours from underneath and mixing a little bit with the purples that I've put on, so that I'm getting a nice variation in the shadows. So that's really going to be most of the shadows, but I am adding a little bit around the edges up here. Just pulling out a little bit across the path. Just using my finger there to smooth off the edges a little bit. Or maybe even a little damp brush, just dipped in water to make the edges a little less sharp, because that's a very wide brush and it tends to make them a little bit sharp, sort of chiselness of it. So just working back into those shadows a little bit. We'll leave that little patch there for some sunlight to be coming through a gap. But I will put in a little extra bit of shadowing here. So all around the edge there I've got some degree of shadowing. Here it's going to come right across the path. Okay, so the path is in place, sea, head and sky. Now we just need to start work on the vegetation. You can just see the ghost of the trees through there and the trunks that I had before, and that was the reference again. But again, I'm not really working very closely off that reference, but I will put some tree trunks in now so I don't lose that idea, and they will give me another bit of depth. So just a little bit of dark paint for this. What I'm going to use is some raw umber and some Mars black for that, and probably a little touch of the purple as well. So I'll pop those out on the palette. Because I'm working two paintings at the moment, my regular palette is tied up with a commission one. I'm just doing this as I go. So just going in quite darkly there with a thicker bit of paint. To establish the vague placement of those trees. Not going to worry too much about having them exactly, because that can be sorted out later. I think that's a wee bit thick, but I'll be able to thin that down by just putting some light coming onto it. I'll try and keep the others not quite so thick. picking up a bit of the blue out of the sea now to lighten off the trunk slightly. And that helps to harmonise it as well by letting some of the underpainting colours work through into it. Just working back into it there. And trying to keep my brush quite wet and loose so that I can pull off little branches rather than make them too thick. And I'm just randomly pulling out trunks, branches here. What I might do is use a slightly smaller brush so I can get some nice detailed branches coming up. And of course a lot of these will just be hidden by the leaves once they go on. I may just put a couple of little branches up here, just coming out like so. And probably one or two over here as well. And they may get added to as we go, or not, depending on how it all goes. And just squiggle, squiggle, squiggle with your brush as you go down, trying to get some nice lines. If you don't like it, just play around with your brush until you get a composition or a pattern that appeals to you. So, a few little dried branches coming out in the tree up there. I can work on the vegetation now, so I need a whole new lot of... Now I'm going to work on the vegetation, I need a whole new lot of colours. I've got the warm red under painting. I'm going to use some yellow ochres, some siennas, some ultramarine blues, and some cerulean blue, and mix those all up to give me various greens in the pathway. So here's my palette. I have some of the gel, gloss gel for structure. I've got transparent red oxide, I've got burnt sienna, raw sienna, yellow ochre, umber, so all the natural earth colours. I've then got some purple and some ultramarine blue. So I'll be mixing up all the colours for the vegetation out of these. And I'm going to bear in mind that I want to keep a sunnier patch coming through here, so that'll be more of the yellows and the reds coming through here. Just scraping them on for the moment with a palette knife. Mixing in a bit of the texture gel and a little hint of blue to get a few greens in that as well. A lot more of the yellow coming through here. Just scraping back and forth into that with my palette knife. You can also use a brush, and you can see how I used big dabby bits when I was putting on the underpainting. You can keep doing that. You don't need to make it very structured, and in fact I can just mix it all on the canvas as I go. And here I'm just adding in some darks and patting on, and just then moving my brush around to get different kind of effects with the undergrowth. Down here I can use the very thin, flat, chisely edge of my brush just to run some sheer purples up, straight purple up into those bits of grass there. So you can use all sorts of different techniques. Then I can go straight into the more red colour. Then I can put it back on its side to make more of a bushy kind of bit of vegetation. So I can change the way my vegetation looks. I can then add in a bit more light if I want to at the edges of it, with the light shining from this direction and hitting on it. All the while letting some of that red play through. I can mix in a bit more blue to get some more darker greens. This is going to be more shadowed area over here, so I'm making lots of darker greens to start with, and they're very earthy greens, no greens out of the tube. I'm mixing in quite a bit of the red, transparent red oxide in there to give it a bit of warmth among all the cool green and some blues that are coming up there. And then I just dip my brush into some ochre colours and some of the raw siennas, back into a bit of purple, and just scrumble it on down in the shadowed areas here underneath those trees, going in for some straight purple in some grassy like ways. And really just playing with the brush and seeing what kind of marks I can make. I think right here we'll just put in some quite darks. Just scrub them in with the brush. Getting some nice sort of sharpy edges on the edge there as the grasses come out. By just jiggling the brush up and down. So play with your brushes and see what different effects you can get with them. I'm just putting in all the really dark but warm colours into this area. Occasionally I add in a bit of the reddy sort of colours as well. A little bit too much there, but I can tone that down by going straight back into the purple and jiggling it up and down. And if I put some of the very dark ones right next to it, a little bit of contrast. And so this is the bare bones that are just going in now, and I can add in more texture as I develop it. But for now I'm just scrumbling on the colours. You always need more paint than you think you're going to need. I was a bit stingy with this, so I'm going to add some more in a minute. But I'll just finish up this little bit here. You really want a palette that's quite big when you're doing a big painting, and my big one's being taken up with another painting, so like I said, I don't quite have the right palette. So I'm just making do with what I have, because I really wanted to get your lesson done. So you can see I'm developing patches of darker shadowed areas and patches of light. I'm going to add in a whole lot more paint now onto my palette. Just keep piling it on so that I can keep developing those moods of light and shadow. I haven't been using much of the texture gel yet, but I think it's time to add a little bit more of that in. So I'm just picking it up with my brush and then mixing up straight into it some greens. So they'll be quite textured greens, and they're going to start going in here where there's a little bit more light coming through. And I may even start dabbing some in up here. You can see I'm just letting the brush dance across the canvas there, suggesting the placement of leaves. I'd like it to come down a little bit over the sea there, just to connect the two areas of the painting, the sky and the sea. I'm now adding in a little bit more of the yellow ochre to lighten up some of the areas. I can also use my knife at this stage if I want to, pick some up like so, kind of pat it on. I'm going to get the rounded one though, because I think it works better for vegetation. It leaves less harsh angular marks, and what you do is just slide it gently across there. What I'm going to do is wait till it dries a bit and then I can add some more in, but for now that's just a start of where that tree's going to be. I can take some of that and use again my palette knife and move it around there, or I can go back to using my broader brush, add in a bit more of the texture gel there, and dance it around the edge there, creating some little bits of vegetation. So you can see that some of this is now out in more sunshine, suggested by the yellow ochre there. And as it comes down here, it's got a little bit more shadowed edge next to the pathway, where the sun's not quite getting on it as much. And I'm adding a little bit of those greens, which have a certain colour when they're out here, but when I add them over these reds and browns and purples that I've had, they acquire a different sort of greenness, and so your underpainting will influence how the colour of whatever you're putting over the top of it. And I'm again just letting my brush dance around on there to create some different textures. Later on I'll do a little bit of spattering on it, which will give me another set of textures to work with as well. Pulling some of those little, just using the little edge of a brush to pull some of those little bits of vegetation out into the path a little bit more. Adding a little bit of colour here and there, little touches of light. Some greener blues, some yellower blues. Sorry, some bluer greens and yellower greens. As I go, just mixing them up. Coming out again into a little patch of sunlight. Not forgetting to go in behind the trees there, and not getting too worried and fussed about them, because I can re-establish those trunks anytime I like. So again, this is just about making a little bit of sunlight around that edge there, till it pulls back down into the shadows again. And really there's nothing definite about any of this. It's all just dabbling on the brush in different ways and working with what I get. I'm not trying to create a specific sort of plant at all. I'm just taking what the brush does for me and working with it. And I find that, for me, that's the joy of painting vegetation. Don't get bogged down in what it is. It's more just the suggestion of some sort of plant. Sure, you can make it more grassy, or you can make it more rounded. You can make it something that's got flowers on, or something that's spiky, but I'm not making it a particular sort of bush, even though I do know that there are particular sorts of bushes that grow around this area. There's bracken, for example, on this path, but I'm not particularly going for a bracken. And I'm just building that up now. I'm going quite well here. In between here, I'm making another little patch of a bit of lightness coming through there. And then I'm going to go in here with quite a dark palette and create some very dark, deep shadows there. But again, keeping them colourful, that's why I've thrown in the purple and some of the deeper reds as well. Just need to get a bit more of the transparent red oxide, which is a great colour. So that some of these darks end up being quite red darks against the blue darks, and so you get patches of warmth and coolness even in the shadowed areas. It's all about getting some nice contrasts in there, and that's what we're working on here. Now I'm going back in with the lights again. And these are shorter kind of grassy patches, you can see, because I'm just jiggling my brush in a shorter motion. Patting it on to create some short grasses there. If I hadn't done the underpainting, there'd be quite a lot of white showing through at this stage and just distracting me, so the underpainting helps with that. So I've got a good mix of vegetation. That's I really have got to get onto this side, and again I'm going to start down in the corner with some quite strong darks, and this is mixing up purples and blues, and some burnt umbers going in there as well, which comes out almost like a dark deep green. I'll come back to that corner. I might even take the path further into here, but we'll see. And I will come back there. I want to build up the lighter areas in there now. I'm going to put in some reds. And draw them down into this darker area here. Just pulling out some very light grasses out of there. It's a great brush for doing that because it's got a nice chisel-y kind of. And they can pop out over the path as well. And they're just pulling out of the very deep shadows there. I do think the path needs to come back that way, so I've got more of a curve there. It's too narrow, so I'm going to cut it back into there eventually. Right now, just working a little bit of darkness down in here, in behind the front area, which is more sunlit, so all on the edge of the path there. And I'll probably bring the shadow from that tree. I don't know whether I'll bring it across the path. I might well bring it across the path here just to add another bit of a dimension to it. Or bring it a little bit further out than it is. Just squiggling that all around. I'd just like a few more greens in there as well. When I say greens, I mean nice muted greens, not anything that's too green. I just wanted a nice earth coloured green. I'm just bumping the brush along there, keeping the vegetation this side a little bit lower. Get it all covered up there, and leave some of that nice warm red to show through. Squiggle, squiggle, squiggle. Moving it down, making more. Grasses there. I need a little bit more contrast up in here. It's all gone a bit too dead, so I'm going to put in some more dark areas. Maybe put a little bit of shadow in here somewhere. Maybe a little bit more shadowy. And then top it off with a nice bit of light around the edges. And I've got to go up through here as well, so that's going to be scrub it around now to make a little bank of vegetation there. I do need to go around the corner, and in a minute I'll just pop around that corner and give that all something there. So put some little darker bits in there too. I said earlier I wanted to do the path more here, so that's easily done. All I'm going to do is scrub back into it with a wet brush and move my path back over this way a bit. And open the path up slightly. Then I'm going to go in with some heavier shadows. Pulling them back into the path there. That's a bit too light there. I'm scrubbing it out, and then I'll pop in some darker shadows, and I can go back over that when it's dry and add in some more if I need to. So it's got the sense of the sand there, but also some shadows as well. And this needs to be a little bit more natural, so what I can do is go in and bring that a little bit more, so it's not so you get a nice shadowy mysterious bit there. I'm just strengthening some of that there. And I will be putting something even a little bit lighter on top of there. At the moment, I want to think about whether I want to do a little bit of splattering onto there, or whether I want to add in a little bit more depth over here, which I probably do, in which case I'm going to put in a bit more of the purpley, or maybe even just some darker greens would be what I want there. And I may do that, try a bit of palette knife work now. You can see that you're adding in a new texture when you do that. So I'm just bumbling and scrumbling over the top with my palette knife. To add in a little bit more depth in some of these areas. And I don't want to forget to add in some of the warm colours as well, and then we just start building up a nice rich texture there by scrumbling the reds over the greens, over the yellows. Pulling and manipulating it with your knife, your wrist, just making it all dance around over the surface. It's starting to get lots of lovely texture there. And I don't want to forget this side, so I'm giving that a little bit of the dance treatment too. And I'm going to add a little bit of that nice warm colour up into the trees as well. There's some darker bits. So some shadowy bits amongst it all. Lighter bits, and it's just all scrumble, scrumble, scrumble with the palette knife at this stage. Sometimes you end up with some marks you didn't intend, so you can just work back into those until they look a bit more natural. So the tree's getting quite a lot of, I can pull up into it too with some suggestions of branches if I want to. If I don't like them, then I can just move the paint around again and cover them up, as I'm doing there. Now it needs a whole lot of lightening up now. And to do that I'm getting a whole lot of yellow ochre. It needs a lot of lightening up, so I'm getting yellow ochre and Naples yellow and going into that with a bit more light now. And doing a little bit. You can see how it comes alive as you start to add in some of that Naples yellow too. Real suggestion of sunlight hitting areas. Which is what I want to achieve here. I can do a bit of grasses by pulling the edge of my palette knife there as well if I want to. Don't want to overdo it, but I do want some areas that have really got some touches of light coming through. And that Naples yellows can pull up and make a few of the grasses coming out into the light as well. Again, I'm not getting too excited about how they look, what sort of grasses they are. It's just pull a bit of light. You can also just scrape back into that as you go as well if you want to create a bit more texture. Pull back some lighter ones out of these darks. And you can do that anywhere you like in here, so pull a few. This is the fun part. Here I'm pulling some, because I'm pulling it back into the darks, they will vary. And then if I vary how hard I pull, I can get some of the secondary layers, not the underpainting, but the secondary layers showing through. So you can be quite creative at this stage with how you make marks through the layers of paint. a little touch of sunlight up in this area. And little touches of sunlight up on this tree as well. Lovely warm, pinky sort of colours coming out now. I'm going to use a bit of that in here. Back in here, the shadows just need to be a little bit deeper. I want this to be a soft sort of wash going in there. But I do want to get a little bit more dark around the edges. And maybe that tree's coming a little bit across there too. So that helps connect up those two sides. A little dark around the edges there. And then I want to smooth it out a little bit, as I did before, with just a little wet brush on the end, and maybe my fingers a little bit. Just don't want them to be harsh and sharp there. That's deepened and intensified the shadows a little bit, which I wanted. So that's the beach pathway done in acrylics. Hope you enjoyed that. I'll get the notes ready for you and it should be uploaded for you very soon. Bye for now.